Rita Lopez was fascinated by the classic novel Red Dragon by Thomas Harris. Unable to fully process the gripping, emotional horror that the characters experienced, she instead found herself captivated by the obsession and self-identification that the novel's antagonist, schizophrenic serial killer Francis Dollarhide, had with the character of the Red Dragon, depicted in the significantly more classical painting by William Blake. At some point, Rita found her Red Dragon in the script for a nearly 90-year-old play which hadn't seen a mainstream production in over 10 years, Mother Courage. Yes, Anna Firling had become Rita's inspiration to be, her guiding light in these trying times. She'd often imagined herself making her way through the chaotic world, only able to rely on those she loved, but knowing that she had to be strong to survive. It made her feel strong. What she lacked, though, according to her other muse, the serial killer Dollarhide, was a becoming. In Red Dragon, Dollarhide killed to satisfy narcissistic fantasies of acceptance, allowing him to sleep consensually with the corpses of women, while their families' corpses consensually watched the magic unfold. This was because he was denied any aim of healthy narcissism as a child, instead forced to completely idolize his abusive and violently vindictive grandmother. As he grasped his narcissism, he gained power, pulling himself closer to the image of the dragon. To do the same, Rita would need to grasp something too. This weighed heavily on her mind, even as the time began to escape her. Soon, like the strong mother, Rita gained a family, a husband. He thought she was very beautiful and not much else, which was satisfactory to someone so hollow like herself. She often wondered if he too was like herself and just hid it very, very well. Then the draft came. Shortly following the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, half of American citizens were executed violently and horrifically. Rita and her husband managed to survive, living locked inside of their small house in a nice suburb on the northeast side of Indianapolis, Indiana. When the horror was over, America no longer had the world's largest army, and therefore was no longer the world's only superpower, and therefore was ripe for revenge and ravage. Her husband was not discharged after failing his psychological evaluation. He was not discharged after his belligerence during basic training. He was not discharged despite losing functionality in his left hand and walking with a limp on his right side. He eventually lost his legs, and then he was discharged. Eventually, due to complications that hospitals were too busy to attend to, and that Rita and her husband were far too poor now to pay for, Rita awoke one morning to find that her husband had stopped breathing and his body was cold. She did not panic. She held his hand to try to warm him up. She sat and thought about how relieved she was that he would no longer beat her or molest her or have sex with her while she was sleeping. She could just look at him. He was still very pretty. Rita had previously practiced taxidermy in some memories from long ago that she'd let go of. Although she'd only practiced on animals before, she'd managed to preserve her husband. She did it while he was placed on an easy chair in their living room. He was pretty there. He had value there. He kept Rita company without causing burden, and she could care for him and not have to worry about it dying or making problems. This was the first step of her becoming a piece of something human and lovable to accompany her. She would use this to anchor her as she stepped forward and tried to profit from this war, like her mother courage.